recording. Well, we're recording. Okay. I think we're just waiting.
Hey.
There she is. Hi.
Everyone's here.
Fun in the books. What? Great job, everyone. What'd you think? How'd it go? Tell me. What are your thoughts?
It was horrible. The bill was just like, it was tough.
It was like more challenging than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
At times, like things that I thought would be like a slam, like the biggest problem that I had was something like so simple. And it was like, of course I should have remembered that. But like reaching out to mentors like pretty early was like really helpful. Yeah, and then just like having a moment in time just to reflect, and also the advice of like sharing it out to the main channel kind of helped further kind of cement the learnings. So
Totally.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's so important. What else? How'd the other pair go?
It's been all right. I think I was like, oh man, this is so hard, and I was finding not much documentation on the React Firestore, and so we went with a few different weird methods. Looked at a lot of tutorials.
Cool. Yeah, the first week, this is like starting a whole new job almost. So there's a lot to do to like kind of just like find your bearings and figure out what's going on, and then starting like an app from scratch like this. The first week, you get like all those hairy merge conflicts and weird things going on. But once the weeks go on and you've kind of had your hands on every piece of the app, it'll all start becoming much more familiar to you. You kind of get into a groove and things it'll be smoother sailing. So first week, check. The code might get harder, but the process will get easier. What else? Other thoughts? The way this will kind of go every week, we'll get together, we'll just chit chat for a minute and touch base, and then we'll jump into demos, which Michael's going to lead today. We'll do a learning module every other week. Alejandro is going to do a learning module today, and then the opposite weeks, we'll do a retrospective where we'll talk about in the last 2 weeks, what appreciations do you have, what went well, and what could we do to improve. So on that note, be sure to be taking notes now about what happened last week and what's happening over the next week. If you want to share during retro so that it doesn't come time for retro and you're like, I don't remember what happened the last 2 weeks at all.
Yeah.
Save yourself the effort and panic and prepare now. With that, I guess, demos, everyone?
Yeah.
Yay.
So how I want us to proceed with our demos, and every week, hopefully it's the same thing. Both teams have roughly 5 minutes to go over what they have worked on through the week. One of the two people can present. First, start off by showing us the work on the production where it's released. And then once you walk through it, then go look, show us the code, share your screen on Zoom and show us the code and talk about kind of the high level, how it works, and maybe some challenges or learnings that you had throughout the week. So I'll hand it off to Tansy's team. One of you two can, I just randomly got a name there, but you go ahead and walk us through your ticket.
Should I just do that then?
Sure, if you'd like to.
So I'll share just the screen. I guess ours isn't in production because I was a little unclear who was doing the final PR approval. And so it's still, now we have merge conflicts, which I saw, but I can fix that later.
Learning number 1.
Yeah, so just on the way it'll always go is the other pair will review it and approve it. Once that's done, a mentor will. And if you have one mentor's approval, then you can go ahead and merge it.
Okay.
But yeah, there's always merge conflict. So if you need help getting those squared away, just let us know.
I think it's just adding the stuff that the other team had done. I think those are the only things that I saw just a second ago.
Oh.
So it's not pretty or anything, but we just have a form here to add new grocery store items. And I will just add, I hate celery, but for some reason that was in my mind. And submit, and there's no approval or anything yet, but then we can go to the database, which we set up a new collection. And I don't know what, I guess people have tested it, so there's so many now, so I don't know where it is, but oh, there it is. So now we get celery showing up as an item. And yeah, as far as the code, I'm going to switch my screen to that. I wasn't sure what the best way that people wanted to organize stuff would be. So I made components as separate files and added a component folder just because it would start to get messy. So then in this get list, we use the React Firestore component. And that's the thing I mentioned earlier that I didn't really see too much documentation on. Like everything was kind of clear in their documentation for fetching data, but not, I was having a hard time figuring out which type of component to use because there were a bunch of different things. One that could be wrapped in a component and others that just used collections or documents, the way that Firebase is set up. And so we were able to fetch the data, and honestly, I didn't change too much here. There was something that I had copied from the original documentation with the loading that kept returning an error, but as Michael pointed out in his example help, this div loading actually changed that and helped out quite a bit. So we've got our grocery items. Also adding this to the index file. We had to add Firestore provider from the React Firestore library. As we had made the mistake not knowing that there was already the Firebase library added and initiated. So we had recreated all of that on this index file. And then Michael pointed out that it already existed, so I only had to import it. And then I went to the add items component, or just made a separate file for that. This one I had a hard time with just because the React Firestore components to me look sort of straightforward with fetching data, but I couldn't understand how to push data to the database. And so I kind of scoured the internet and I found someone that kind of walked through using a form that made sense to me, because then you can input text. And so you add a form and a button, update the state, which I think the Firestore, React Firestore was supposed to sort of mitigate using all the state information, but I'm not completely sure. And then we're able to add the text submit and add a value. Right now it's only rendering as a test this one specific path to the database. But I guess the next step would be to be able to have key pairs or paths that would generate and return any of the database items. But yeah, do you have anything to add, Tansy?
No, I think you pretty much covered it. Like, I mean, the only thing I kind of would want to ask as well is like, how would you guys sort of suggest we use the with Firestore for the add item? Because I think we both couldn't find, we were just like, how would this work? Like the get list part makes sense, but not the add item. So that's like a question I just have.
You want to go back to that code on your screen so we can reference that?
The add item or the Firestore?
The add item, or how like how would you use like Firestore, like or with Firestore here?
So To me, I think that you did exactly what you should have done here. It looks like you found some documentation with specific ways to access Firebase. Reading it is one thing, and we have those React components to help read the data, but writing to it is a different thing altogether. And generally, you have to use that Firebase object directly, like you did,
Okay.
Firestore. So I'm happy with this. I'm pleased with it. So I don't think there's anything different you should have done, to answer your question.
Okay.
I think the code will evolve over time as you maintain it and add new things to it, but I think this is a good first draft. It does exactly what I expected.
It's definitely interesting to see how much stuff changes, because one of the errors that you got that was not needed for the timestamp, it said that the timestamp was needed because of a certain reason, and I was like, okay, I won't. I'll keep that there. And turns out, I guess updates, it's not needed anymore. So
yeah, Michael's note on like the evolution of the code is going to be really important, because as you're like going into these like really young components that don't have a lot in them, you might find yourself like completely scrapping what's in there and having to sort of start over, which will feel weird. You're like, I feel like I'm destroying something somebody created, but do know that that is part of the process and it's going to happen, and feel comfortable in doing that. Like you might feel like this can't be right. Like I can't like have to redo this whole thing, but that might be the case. Given to what Michael was saying, he's working on at work right now. Sometimes you just have to scrap the whole thing and start over. So, but this looks fantastic. Work.
I have a fun trivia question. I asked it on the pull request, and I'll ask it again here. So if you go to line 28, you're using a form element with an on submit. So this works perfectly fine. And then there's another solution that you may have come across or you may have thought about, where you add the on click to the button to execute the same function. So what is the difference between those two?
I looked that up because you usually see buttons with on click, but I still couldn't figure out the ultimate difference. It's just that people across the internet were saying that submit is for forms and on click is just a button click. Like it doesn't, it's not proper etiquette per se to update information in that way. But again, I couldn't find a huge difference, just the protocol for using it.
Does anyone have a wild guess of like a big stark difference between the form on submit and button on click? I have one in my mind. I'm going to see if anybody else has any ideas.
Is it the way that the event object will like bubble up? Like it typically has the target, so the target would be form as opposed to like button.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a difference. So my thought goes along the lines of the user experience. So that's a programmatic difference, but there's a user experience difference that in this example, it's not noticeable as much, but as this gets built out, you'll notice it more and more. So I'll say it. Can't wait anymore, right? So adding an on submit to a form rather than a button lets you submit the form with the enter key, which sounds kind of silly, but it's a huge accessibility improvement when you have a big form and maybe somebody has to go finish, like there's 10 fields, right? And there's like an error on the third field. So you go up there and type your last name in correctly and hit enter. You don't have to scroll all the way back down and hit the done button or submit button. So it lets you do a lot of the work from your keyboard, which is a huge improvement. And yeah, so it's just something to think about. I think this is actually the better way of doing it.
So on submit allows you to do that?
Because it's wrapped in a form element.
Okay.
And if you have any of the child elements focused, input, button, anything in there under the form, if it's focused and you hit enter, it'll submit the form rather than do whatever you have focused.
Did anyone, I wish we had like team names for the week so I could just ask both, but did you guys get to go through the accessibility portion of it? or maybe I guess it doesn't really matter since this is not the intended behavior, or not the intended like component that we'll be using in the product. Yeah,
was that a question?
Yeah, sorry, I was just like wondering if you went through the accessibility instruction. It was just cool because they have you download like a little Chrome extension, and then there's a part that allows you to do tabbing, and it actually runs a few tests. It's like 2 seconds. I thought it was neat. I've never done it before.
Yeah,
it's kind of cool.
That sounds cool. Like I don't think well, at least I don't know about it.
Cool. I think there's some documentation about it in the project brief. So check out the project brief. It'll have you download that extension. And this, as you mentioned, isn't like a final product portion of it. But I feel like anytime you do any kind of pull request with a UI feature, so like your user is seeing something here, you should test it just to make sure, like at the end, we're not scrambling to like make sure it's accessible. Instead, we're like building accessibility each step along the way. So definitely do that. Test these for accessibility. One other thing I wanted to point out when we were in here, if you flip back to Firebase, if you go into Firestore in your browser, Okay, so in the middle in the items column, there are those like 3 lines, like a little filter. If you click on that, you're able to filter. So like if you're looking for a specific item, you can see item names, celery, whatever. It'll help you navigate Firestore. Anyway, amazing job. This is fantastic. Very, very good.
All right, next group up.
All right.
Awesome.
Okay, so I'll go. I guess I'll share my screen and I can show you the demo.
See it.
All right. So cool. All right. And I have it pulled up already. So, well, it should be. Okay. So yeah. So it's a pretty basic on the user interface, but it's exactly what we were instructed to do. So if you click here, and we decided to have it where it says this is list view, and then when you click here, this is where you add an item, and I can show you the code. Actually, I guess we can kind of do a handoff with Nabil as well, because I have the code, but for some reason, when I pulled it, it didn't give me everything. So, yeah. I guess we can figure that out later, but I can talk about we had to add the dependency, and so which was pretty simple, but you still had to make sure it was there. So which it is, the React router DOM, and we use the where is it? This is the React training, React router, and so yes. Let me go back. And so then we were, I guess it seemed pretty simple, and I know Nabil had talked about that, is that actually this part of the demo, which you think is simple, but maybe you don't know it off the top of your head, which we didn't, and that was making sure that the links were sticking to the bottom, and actually, well, when we did the CSS, and so you're like, oh, that's pretty easy, and we had to go fishing for it. So we included that, and actually, Nabil, can you share your screen a bit? Because this is the problem, is that for some reason, I don't have all of it. Like I have half of it, but obviously it works. I have no idea, but like, yeah.
I bet you if you close that file and open it back up, it'll be what it looks like. You have some changes that haven't been like synced up. So just close the file and then open it back up.
Okay.
It'll warn you something. Just don't save.
Don't save? Okay.
Don't save, and then open it back up.
Wow.
That happens to me all the time where I have
Okay.
some changes and then I'll git pull and then those changes are still like hanging around and it doesn't want to
Okay.
clobber them for you in case those are important.
Okay. Wow, learned something right here. Because
Yeah.
I was like, why? Because I actually, I was talking to Bill, and we were both like, okay, let's just keep going. So of course we did everything. We it was all basically CSS, and at first, which is interesting, we didn't know which one to do it. We were like, do we do it in the index or the app? And so we chose to do it in the app. I'm not for sure if would it have rendered if we had done it in the index, or we needed to do it in the app because we were kind of stuck there. We were like, okay, let's go left or right.
I think it would work in either case. As long as
Okay.
the CSS is imported, then it gets bundled in with your app.
Got you. Yeah, we were like, yeah, that is the question. It was like fork in the road. So, Nabil did the nomenclature for this, and but we were searching because of course we thought we were like, oh, this is easy, we got it, like this could work, and yeah, we were like, okay, and we had to play around with it because of course it's CSS, and so we have here where we obviously are a footer, but we chose to do it and create more of a navigation. And Nabil added the color in the background too, so we could actually see it. I was thinking more of I was like, okay, let's just have the links, let's just get it done. And I was like, no, we need color, we need to make it like, so, which works fine. And then we, let's see what else. Yeah, and so we have the image, and am I missing anything, Nabil?
What does Flex Grow do? I've never used Flex Grow before.
Oh yeah, sorry. We use Flexbox, and yes, Nabil added that. I am familiar with Flexbox, but he was telling me about that, and we searched, and yeah. So Nabil, if you want to talk about that, because I don't want to trip over it. Like,
yeah, sure. So Flex Grow, you've probably seen Flex, which is a lot easier. It wraps up like 3 things in one. It wraps up Flex Shrink, Flex Basis, and Flex Grow all into one thing. Flex Grow is just, it takes like a proportional unit, which means that if I say like, so both of the links in the navigation, since there's 2, are going to occupy the same proportional unit, which both of them have 1 unit. If one had, if say we had like 3 elements, and I had one with the unit 1, one with the unit 2, and one with the unit 1 again, the one with the unit 2 would occupy twice as much space as the other individual units. So that was just the way. If you switch over to back to the demo,
hold on.
You'll just see that the 2 buttons at the bottom are occupying the same amount of space, and that's how that's happening.
Awesome.
Great work.
Detailed explanation.
Yeah. And no, I'm sorry. So I'll be honest. I think we know when you're demoing, and we kind of didn't practice. I'll be honest. We had a general overview, but yeah. So I completely forgot about the main part, which was the React router, which basically it was a tutorial, so it was technically copy paste, but after we had the dependencies, of course. But yeah, we just followed along with the training and kind of just we're trying to figure out how it worked and make it as simple as possible for us because we only had a week. And so, yeah, this is...
Wait, we did some work.
No. I'm just saying. No, I'm just saying. But I mean, I think...
documentation.
No, that's what no. Yeah, I mean, I'm saying that's what I simplified it. But yeah, we had to read through it. But I think where the biggest part was us I think also where the fact it is Collab Lab and just trying to figure out what we needed to do, because at first we were like, okay, this seems pretty straightforward. And then, like I said, we got this was pretty straightforward, but I think where we got hung up in this project was how do we do it in the CSS? Like there is just a couple of different ways. And I think it was just how do we approach it and the collaboration aspect of it. So yeah, we definitely did some work, but yeah, that was, I think, the biggest challenge of this week.
Cool. This is great. Great work this week. I love too that you showed us the documentation. The documentation throughout your careers is going to be so vital. So getting familiar with how to read through those and how to find those answers now is going to be amazing.
I just wanted
You
to
did great.
mention maybe like 2 more things that was kind of cool on here. So just how this works, there's the entire router area, which allows us to identify, it's basically the space in which we can route different like links to different browser why can't I think of it, different paths. There we go. One neat thing was when we were reading through the documentation in the demo, it talked about link as the module to import. Then we found navlink, which allows us to add class states. So when you look in the demo, when you click on each individual navigational element, you'll see that the active one has a different color showing that it's actually active. Navlink is the thing that allowed us to do that pretty simply. So as soon as a navigational link is clicked, it'll add the class active on that link. And so we just added a couple of styles on there, and so we could take advantage of that.
Yeah.
That is really cool. I have a funny story. Maybe like 7 years into my JavaScript career, I started using React Router, and I actually rewrote navlink, even though it was there, just so I could add CSS classes to active links, because I didn't know that that was a component. So major props to you for reading through the documentation correctly and not doing what I did and rewriting it. Because I spent like,
Yeah, he actually, that was actually, I guess, and maybe kudos to us because we're not 7 years in, but I think you were saying, I think when we talked to you as far as just using React as a tool, because we were just so like, oh, we need to create it. And it's like, no, React has it for you. And we're just kind of like, so used to kind of doing it, I guess, vanilla and just kind of writing it ourselves. So yeah, we had to like find that because that was originally our approach. Like what you said, that was where we were trying to go, and we got stuck, and we had to double back.
Fantastic work. Very good. I loved all the extra knowledge. Like that's a really good thing to do during a demo, Nabil, how you're like sharing all this extra stuff that you learned, because each of the other people who work on this team are going to be experiencing, like interacting with this as they continue building the app. So it's really helpful to share those little bits and pieces of knowledge as you go. So amazing job.
Is that something that we could, like, would be helpful to add to the wiki or something, like documentation stuff that we find, or?
Yeah, totally. Add it anywhere that's helpful for you. It's really helpful to be added to the PR.
Wiki.
If you like, if you're creating your PR, you can like leave notes throughout the code, and that's helpful too for anybody reviewing it, or like if the other people need to go back and see why or how you implemented something. All the knowledge. Cool. Anything else on this?
Actually, one more thing.
Yeah.
So the additional thing is we went on to CSS Tricks and we found this article on sticky navigations, especially, well, bottom sticky navs. Actually, I don't think it was a nav, but it was just anything like something sticky at the bottom. One of the neat things that we learned from there that I think we would have not done is it actually has you, if you have something sticking to the bottom, it actually technically should cover whatever is behind it. So if you were to scroll all the way to the bottom and you didn't have like enough cushion, it would actually just permanently hide things behind the bottom navigation. So the approach that they have you do is basically create like 2 containers. So you have in this here, you'll see that we have the tag main, and I think it's wrapped from line 15 to line 24. And then you have the footer navigation. And so they actually work as independent units. So you'll never be in a situation where there is content that's flowing behind the sticky navigation.
And yeah, we can put that in the, once we create one, we can put that in the wiki, because I don't know if we posted that, but yeah, we used that. That was a big document for us when we found, also too, a Mozilla document. It was like those combinations for our CSS. We kind of looked at that.
Cool. Yeah, drop those things like in the PR next time around. That way, like that, because those live on forever. Those closed PRs. So if people need to go back and be like, oh, there it is.
Got it.
Great work.
Awesome.
If there's nothing else on this, then let's get moving on to the learning module. We have about 30 minutes to do a learning module and get set up on next week's issues. Alejandro,
Awesome.
on to you.
Sure. I find my browser window. It's this one. There you go. All right. So today we're going to talk about code reviews. Yay. So, all right. So let me see. Percent. There you go. Yeah, all right. Yeah. Where's the chat? All right. Anyways, so I'm not going to be checking the chat, so just in case. Let me turn off my video because this is kind of slow. There you go. All right. So, well, code reviews, right? Let me put the timer here so I don't like go crazy. All right. So here we are. Oh, code reviews. All right. So this is what we're going to talk about today. So what is a code review? The code review cycle. What makes a code review a great code review? How can I help others review my code? How can I review others' code? And some tips that I found useful during my development life. So yeah, like some small tips in GitHub. So, all right. So first, what is a code review, right? So a code review is basically a conversation around changes. Whatever it is a feature request, a bug fix, a hot fix, like whatever you want. Like, yeah, you talk about your changes with your team. Okay. So it is the best place, in my opinion, to share knowledge and learn from others, right? So when you open a pull request, you're sharing what you know, like what you did here, like, hey, I learned about React Router, or I learned about Firestore, right? So that is the best place to ask questions. I mean, you can ask questions in Slack and all that, but you know, like Slack, you talk a lot and the questions they fade away in time. So it is better to talk about that in the pull request, in my opinion. Also, it is the best place to ask questions and discuss that over there. And yeah, so that is basically a code review, right? So the code review cycle is basically you open a pull request, you receive feedback, then you make changes, and the feedback starts again. So what we do in our team is like, I open a PR, then I ask for feedback. And when I make the changes, I ask for feedback again. Like, hey team, I made this change. You want to take a look? And they take a look next day or the same day. And I make the changes again, and it goes on and on until we are happy with my changes, right? And then we merge the PR, which is what we did this week, basically. And which is what we're going to keep doing during the next 7 weeks and in your future life. All right, so, well, this is the cycle. Well, what makes a code review a great code review, right? So one thing that is really important is you don't have to focus on stylistic changes. That said, like, hey, you miss a semicolon here, you need a space. There isn't tabbing that spaces, like, hey, you're calling this method on something that is not, like, that is prohibited, right? So for this, we have tools like Prettier, ESLint, and type checkers, right? So Prettier will take care of all the like spaces, semicolon, stylistic things, right? For example, hey, you miss, like, it will add the spaces before, I don't know, a curly brace, or will remove the space, or add, I don't know, line breaks somewhere. So that tool will take care of that. ESLint will take care of unique unused variables. Like, as you saw in Michael's review, he added like, hey, you're not using this, you might want to delete it. So the tool helped us to identify that problem. Also, and type checkers, that would be Flow and TypeScript, they will let you know, like, hey, you're trying to call something that is not possible here, right? So you should rely on tools as much as possible all the time. And if you don't have those tools, you can just talk to your team and say, hey, we need this because this will make our lives way easier. So, well, don't focus on stylistic changes. For that, we have tools. Also, a great code review, for doing a great code review, you should try the feature locally, or at least in the test environment. For us, could be you can pull the branch locally, or you can just test in Netlify. So yeah, so like it is really difficult sometimes to figure out what the code is doing. So it is good to take a look like locally, or like clicking around basically. Also, this is super, super important. Ask yourself, will I understand this code a month from now? Right? So if you don't, like if the answer is not as strong yes, you should like ask for changes. Like say, yeah, like this looks good, but I think you need to clarify this part, right? And go from there, like iterate, because the code is not your code, it's everybody else's code, right? You're going to maintain, I don't know, if you work today on the index and in the routes, you don't know in a month what is going to happen. Maybe you will get back to that code, and if you don't understand it, like that is a time waste, right? So make sure you understand the code and you know that it is simple and clear for you. Also praise, like be nice to other people, like say, this is great, I learned this, I didn't know that, like this is a great, I don't know, function that you write, like this will save me time in the future. Anything, like a PR, you can praise at least once in a PR, so don't hesitate to do it. It is really important. Also, default to approval, yeah, don't be like a gatekeeper in your PRs, just default to approval. I don't know what else to say about that one. And also be kind and empathic, right? Like, I mean, you work on a PR for 2 or 3 days, and you need to know, like you spend like a lot of time on it. So be kind. Don't ask changes like, I need you to change this because some reason. It is better to say like, hey, I think that this could be better as a, I don't know, as a constant, something like that. What do you think? Like it changes all the tone of the conversation. So don't like request things just because. So yeah, be kind and empathic. Also help others understand your changes. I'm going to talk about on the next section. Try to answer all the questions. Try to like, don't leave open questions. Even if the answer you have is like, hey, I'm going to search for this later, whatever it is, but don't leave the open questions. And take your time. When you're reviewing a PR, that is also work. If you're working on a team, like it is understandable that you may spend, I don't know, an hour or two in a PR if the PR is too big, right? So take your time. You will learn, and it is better to, like do that with a lot of detail. So yeah, that makes a great code review, in my opinion. Okay, oh my gosh. Yeah, there you go. So how can I help others review my code? So a meaningful PR description is awesome. That helps a lot. You had great PR descriptions, so keep doing that. You're doing great. Also, if it is possible, write meaningful commit messages. This is something that happens a lot, and I am guilty of this as well. For example, if I'm working into something and I just want to commit change, I usually write like work in progress. And that doesn't make any sense. So that is bad for you and bad for the team and bad for everything. So like, don't do that. Just try to write something meaningful, take your time. There is no such thing as a long commit message. Just write the thing. Also self-review your code. So when you open a PR, try to document as much as possible, like explaining why you did what you did. Like I named this function like this because this, or maybe even ask questions like, I took this approach, but what do you think about that, Alejandro? I don't know. Or what do you think about this? I think this is better than what we have in this other place. So ask questions all the time. It doesn't matter if you are the one creating the pull request. And also use screen capturing tools like Loom. Loom is great. I think Nabil used it this week. So I encourage you to take a look at Loom. It has a free tier that is pretty good. Also, Sketch is a screen capturing tool that lets you add notes. And a shameless plug here, you can use Zapier as well. That is a tool that we created at Zapier. It is a tool for recording GIFs, videos, and taking screenshots and adding annotations. So it is free as well, so you can use it. All right, so some tips about exploring code in GitHub. Right, so one thing that I tend to do is first I go to the Files Change tab, right? And then I click, can you see my mouse? This is better. Right, so you go to this tab first, and then you go to this, like to the commit drop down. You click it and you select the first commit, right? Because as you can see here, like this has 800 lines, new lines. So that is a lot to review. And I only removed 10 lines, right? So that is like 790 lines to review, but we don't want to do that. So you can click here in this dropdown and start from the first commit. And then you can start clicking like here, next and previous. So that will give you like a timeline of the changes. So it is almost impossible to have, I don't know, 800 changes in all the 3 commits, right? So this will make it easier to wrap your head around all the changes. So you go from the, oh my gosh, you go from the first one until the last one. So that is one tip. And the other one is you can mark your files as viewed. So when someone changes the file, it will auto open like this, for example, the package.json, and it will have a message like, this file changed since your last review. So you will know that you should take a look at just the package.json, not or the other 4 files, right? So this is good. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Also, I added a video here that you can watch later. It is like a 6-minute video. This is good. You should watch it, 100%. And here we have some links as well. Yeah, that's all I have.
Love it. This is great. How did code review go for each of you pairs? How did you feel when you were doing code review?
I feel like I didn't get super detailed because I didn't know. I mean, I pulled the code down and it worked, and I was kind of like, I see what's happening, but I can see now I could have added maybe more detailed description.
I think the hardest part about code reviewing is like, you don't know what you don't know. And so sometimes you just like look at the code and be like, seems to be working. I don't know, approve. So like, if you find yourself in that situation, try and ask a question. Even if it's like, can you tell me more about what this line of code does? Or like, what is this function? Like, you know, like ask some questions. And not only does that help you learn, but it helps solidify the other person's understanding of it as well as they're trying to reiterate their knowledge back to you. So you guys did great though. Super impressed. Any other questions about code reviews? You'll become more comfortable doing it going forward. Nabil.
I have a question. So you go through the PR, there's a whole bunch of different comments on there. You're addressing certain comments. Some comments eliminate a need for change. I did like dig through some like blogs to kind of figure out what to do. I just want to make sure that my understanding is like the right one. So if there's a change that you should be making, you go in, you make the change, the commit, push, and then it should be reflected in the PR at that point as you're doing it. Is there anything additional that needs to happen at that point? Do you need to call out? Is there a way to like associate like that particular, I noticed that like as I'm doing those things, the code that's getting touched that's also being commented on, it like a little flag that says like outdated appears next to each thing. What's the process of that? I almost feel like it would need another code review like after I update something like that, but just curious to see.
Yeah, like that is the normal flow. Like you make the changes and you talk to your team. It will differ from team to team, but that is basically it. You make changes and you ask for changes again ask for a review again, sorry. Yeah, but that's pretty much it.
Great.
There's a couple things in the UI that you can do to help facilitate that back and forth, because it naturally has some churn, churn in between. They make the request, you make the change, then maybe they don't notice for a day, and then it takes a long time sometimes to make those back and forths. So up in the top right-hand corner, you can add a reviewer. And if someone submits a review and they don't approve, maybe they have a concern that they actually found a breaking bug, so they won't approve it, right? You go and fix that bug. You can actually, there's a refresh icon that you can click, and it submits them as a reviewer again. They will get notified again. Like, shameless plug again, we use Zapier a lot internally, and I have Zapier set up so it notifies me when people add me as a reviewer. So if you click that refresh icon, I think they'll get another email, and for me, I'll get another notification to Slack. So that's always really helpful to just make sure they know that their attention's needed again. If you're the reviewer and you are on the other end of that, you can actually review just the one commit. Like maybe they have a CSS issue that they need to resolve. You can click that one commit and look at that, and that helps you block out the noise unless it's needed. You need to look at the rest of the code for context, but that's what I generally do is I'll just look at the latest commit since the last review.
Amazing. Anything else before we jump into next week's issues?
Oh, we should probably do that.
Okay, let me share my screen with you. Share screen, this one. Okay, so if we look at the project board here, which you all did a great job of moving your tickets down the line. This one this one needs to be moved over a little bit, so whoever's in charge of that ticket can take care of that. But it looks like next week's issues are issue number 3. As a user, I want to set up a new shopping list so that I can track purchased items. And number 4, as a user, I want to add a new item to the shopping list. So number 3 is going to be actually creating lists. And number 4 is going to be adding items to that list. The pairs, and you can find those in the project brief, are going to be Tansy and Nabil, and then the second pair will be Devon and Megan. You'll see in Slack, I posted 2 threads again where you can coordinate when you're going to pair and your progress on everything. But do either of those issues stand out to anybody? If you want to claim one, go ahead and claim what you're excited about. If you don't care, I'll just assign them in order. Thoughts? Anybody want to raise your hand for one or the other?
Is one like Firebase?
They're both going to be pretty Firebase heavy. One will be like setting up. So let's see. You can dig into these when we go out into breakout rooms, but one's going to be generating a new unique token and then saving it to local storage and showing the list. So there'll be some logic dealing with local storage and then also adding that to Firebase. And then this one's going to be more optimizing that form to actually send items to the database and marking them with some new data of when that item will need to be purchased again. So both have Firebase.
Awesome.
Okay, well then I'm just going to do them in order. The top pair is Tansy and Nabil, so you'll do number 3. And I'll go ahead and assign it this time, but next week I'll just have y'all do it so you can get familiar and comfortable with that. And then I'll move it over to in progress. And number 4 is going to go to Devon and Megan. Okay. Move it. Okay. We will go into breakout rooms. Let me figure out how to use Zoom. Right? How? Am I even sharing my screen with you all?
You are.
Okay. Gosh.
Alejandro, is there a specific ticket that you wanted to jump in on?
Not really.
Okay, just assign us to one of the rooms. It'll be fun.
Yeah.
We randomly then create breakout rooms. Assign Devon. Megan, Michael, and number 2.
It was nice catching up with all of you. I think all of you did a really good job in your first week. So I'm excited to see where y'all go.
You all did
Thank you.
amazing. Okay, I'm going to end this recording, jump into breakout rooms, and we'll start on the next week.